board from those member agencies. 3.3 million people and $253 billion economy is what we serve. And of course, an important part of that economy is agriculture and our community of agriculture in the area. The Water Authority provides about 75% of the water to the area, again, through imported water and through local supplies that we've developed. So kind of looking back at where we've been and where we're going now, back in 1999, we were really very dependent on Metropolitan Water District. Metropolitan Water District, for anyone that they may not be familiar with it, is pretty much the wholesaler to most of Southern California. So they have member agencies. San Diego is one of them, and they bring water from the Colorado River and from the State Water Project. And so we were getting water pretty much primarily from Metropolitan. Little tiny bit of local supplies, but the majority of it was coming from Metropolitan. Everything was good. That was great. We had lots of water until we hit a huge drought. And you can see this. We had in the early 90s, San Diego had a 30% cutback in their water supplies. So, you know, that's every business, every home, you know, every farmer. Farmers were actually cut back. Agriculture was actually cut back even more. We were also facing a 50% cutback in the next, in a month or so. We were saved by that in March of 92. Miracle March, it rained and it rained and it rained, filled up all the reservoirs. We didn't have to go to a 50% cut. But, you know, after living through that and that uncertainty, the idea was that we're not going to do this again. We need to make sure that we have a reliable source of water so that our economy and our area can thrive. So what did we do? So we put together a diverse portfolio to really bring reliability and resiliency to water. The first thing is water use efficiency. In the early 90s, San Diego was one of the first agencies to put together a water use efficiency program, toilets, nozzles, showers, that kind of thing.
Sorry. I was a resident at that time, and it's like, hey, shower heads.
I think we're much better now. Yes, toilets, water heads, shower heads, all of that were brought into place. And what's happened over the last 30 years or so is that we've really seen the per person water use go down over time. We also invested heavily in local storage to make sure that when there was rain and when there was a lot of water available, that we had the ability to store it within our surface area so that we could then use it during dry periods and times that water was scarce. Also, there was the Carlsbad desalination plant. Again, this is pretty much a drought-proof supply. This is a supply that when we're facing drought, we're facing low water use or limited rainfall, limited precipitation, imported water is not available. The seawater desalination plant is there, and so it only gives us a buffer against those other supplies failing or being cut back. And then we also put money into a Lake Hodges pumped energy storage project. This is a project that helps our local utilities. They pump water up into a higher reservoir when there is low demand, and then when there is high demand for energy, they let it drain down and run generators, yes, turbine generators, and provide energy. So we also have worked really hard on making sure that our pipelines are secure and aligned correctly. Our member agencies are investing heavily in both purple pipe projects, and what we're really seeing in the next decade is going to be a lot of potable reuse projects. So these are projects where, you know, they take wastewater, treat it, and then use it for potable uses. We also built a treatment plant that allowed us to be more flexible in the kind of water that we took from Metropolitan and allowed us to treat our own water. And then about 50% of our water comes from this QSA water transfer and canal lining. And so what this is that the San Diego Water Authority pays the Imperial Irrigation District to do conservation. And then with the conservation conserved water, they sell that conserved water back to the water authority. So again, it's a win-win, you know, it gives them a source of revenue, gives us sort of source of water. And it's conserved water, so it's not a, you know, it's not a used source, it's just doing more with less. One of the really good things about that conserved water that we have on from the QSA is that it's really high priority bright water. So this year, for the first time ever, the USDR declared a shortage on the Colorado River. The first states to cut are going to be Arizona, Nevada, and Mexico. California won't have to cut until the levels drop even further. And then within California's right holders, IID is one of the highest right holders. So our water from them is pretty secure, at least for the foreseeable future. So this is where we are right now. You can see that bar that used to be 95% metropolitan, it's gone down to about 18% metropolitan. We have the investments in conserved water from IID and from the canal lining. Again, those are Colorado sources that we've saved water and then been able to bring it to the district. About 50% of our supply. 4% is a transfer from San Luis Rey. 5% is our groundwater. We also have about 5% recycled water, purple pipe projects. 8% is seawater desalination. And then we have about 10% local surface water. So we've really diversified our portfolio. That drought in 1999 really opened our eyes, said, hey, we want to make sure that that doesn't happen again. And as we come to we're in our second drought in the last, how many years, you know, this kind of investment is really where a lot of people are starting to kind of look at how can they build this kind of portfolio and expand the amount of sources that they have. Looking forward to 2045, what we're really going to see is a lot of potable reuse. That's going to go up to about 18% of our demands. That's our member agencies, those retail agencies are taking that wastewater, treating it, either putting it in a reservoir or underground and using it for potable purposes.
So the seawater desalination, which one is that? Is that the 9%?
It's the 8% right there.
And then it's 9%?
Right.
So it's all, you have it only going up 1%, huh?
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that because of the cost benefit or the cost per gallon of that water?
It's costly, yes. Yeah, it is. It's a kind of a buffer supply. It's really reliable, but it is expensive. And so we want to make sure that you know, we're balancing that reliability and cost.
So what is the cost you figure per acre foot?
You know what? I actually don't know off the top of my head, but I can get that for you. Get it for you. Yeah.
Very interested in that.
Yeah. So this is our per capita water use. You can see, like I was telling you, about 50% reduction in per capita water use from the 1990s to the 2020s. One of the things that we're seeing in our area is that after the last drought, it lasted from about, depending on who's in county, 2014 to 2016, 2017, we didn't see a bounce back. We didn't see a huge increase in demand after that last drought. Usually after a drought, people do things like let their lawns die or you know, stop taking showers or whatever, and things go back to normal and they pick up again. We didn't see that after the drought. We're still seeing pretty low demand numbers. And so our use in 2020 still remains pretty low. It's one of the things that we want to make sure the state considers as they look at any sort of restrictions, is that, you know, if your demand has already stayed low, it gets harder and harder to make people use less water.
Mm-hmm.
We offer a really robust portfolio of water efficiency opportunities. We have classes for both professionals and for residential customers. We also have rebates for toilets and washers and things like that. And then we have a new program that we just are getting started where we're partnering with SDG&E. They have a low income program where they go into their low income customers, put in both water saving or energy saving devices and water saving devices. And we're partnering with them. We're going to go in and put in toilets at the same time so that kind of helping that low income market that may not be able to invest in those higher efficiency things, make that save water. So we also have for agriculture, we have audits for ag customers. We have different devices that we rebate for those. So it's another program that we have. All of them are available on Water Smart. So this is the press that we're getting this time around. You remember the last time where everyone was panicking, you know, this is our favorite cartoon right here where we have the going into the drought, we have all our supplies there ready to go. So what we're working on now is to really make sure that we can continue to rely on those supplies, that we're not, you know, getting any arbitrary cuts or anything like that, that you know, we've made these investments. Our area has paid for these investments, and they you know, paid for the reliability, and so we want them to be able to have that at this time when we're in a drought. Again, so we're just really water conservation is really hardwired into San Diego. Again, we're not seeing big jumps from the last drought. People are continuing to use less money, less water. We're seeing people remove their turf lawns and put in more California friendly or more low water use plants and designs. We have our Colorado River right water. We have our desal and potable reuse that are both drought resistant. And the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan is a plan we have to do every 5 years. In this one, coming out of the last drought, they added a component to those plans that says you have to do an analysis and look at what would your supplies and what would your demand be if you had 5 dry years moving forward. And so we looked at that and we said, okay, if we had 5 more dry years, what would our supplies be and what would our demand be? And we showed in that analysis that we would still have enough supplies to meet the demand, even if we have another 5 years of dry weather. So what are we working on now? Investments in potable reuse. Again, we're looking to help our agencies as they kind of fund that moving forward. Well, one of the other things we're looking for is doing storage in Lake Mead. This would again allow us to store some of the Colorado River water that we have rights to in Lake Mead. It would help Lake Mead, or help raise the levels of Lake Mead. Again, make it available, store it when we have wet weather here down in San Diego and our reservoirs are filling up and maybe we don't need as much imported water. Keep it out in Lake Mead, raise those levels, and then pull it out again during those dry years.
What about the evaporation though? I mean, are you gonna pay for reduce based on the evaporation? Or is that
Typically,
gonna be
they-
somebody else with the lower priority?
Yeah, typically, those kind of agreements include those calculations. We have
Okay.
that kind of agreement, yeah. And you know, if you were storing it locally, you'd also have evaporation too. So
Well, no, this is underground, right?
no, we store it in surface storage here.
Okay.
And then we're trying to expand our energy projects with another green energy project down at San Vicente. Again, a larger project that would pump water up during low demand periods and bring it down, help cut with any outbreaks for electricity. I did want to touch briefly on kind of what the California water supply conditions are around this day right now. I think a lot of agencies are kind of facing that 1991 decision and outlook right now. So if you look at this is an index that's up in Northern California that really measures the runoff from, or the precipitation going into the State Water Project. And so you can see that both 2020, which is the green bar there, was an extremely dry year, well below normal. And then 2021, again, was even drier than that year. So coming into the current water year, which just started in October, we're doing a little bit better. We had some atmospheric rain go through in October. You just got first little uptick there at the beginning, and then we just had this actually includes the rain that happened this week. So we'll have to wait and see. It's still early in the water year. It'll either continue to go up or it'll flatten out, and then we'll have another below normal dry year.
So what would be like a high year? I mean, would it be up to like 75 or, if it's really wet, you have the 2 dry years and the normal, what would be like a wet, how high up would it go?
It's about up to 75 is about what you get,
Is it?
yeah.
Okay.
So looking at the reservoirs across the state, again, our reservoir levels are low going into the water year. We have hopes that we'll have a better water year than the last 2, and that we'll see some improvements, and especially those that are dependent on water up in the north would get some relief. Lake Oroville, this is one we were talking, I think, was earlier about some records. Like Oroville broke its record for the lowest level going into a rainy season this year since 1977. So you can see that red line right there going in. Again, the rain that we had recently helped, kind of bumped it up a little bit, but still well below normal and well below capacity. Local temperatures, and I'm sure you guys are aware of this too. We're seeing above normal temperatures 24 out of the last 25 months. When we have these higher temperatures, they increase the demand for water. They also increase, the evaporation. So the water that's in surface storage and in aqueducts and things like that, we see less water coming through because it evaporates with those higher temperatures. So this is something that we keep a really close eye on and watch, because we want to make sure that we don't reverse that trend of demand going down with those higher temperatures pushing it back up. So this water year, we're seeing some a little bit good news. We're above normal right now. Again, it's still really early in the water year. It'll be the next couple months will really tell us where we're going to end up. Unfortunately, if you look at the projections, below normal is pretty favored for precipitation, and higher than normal temperatures are favored as well. So, again, we'll just kind of have to see and watch and see over the next couple months what our water year turns out.
But most of your moisture though comes in Northern California, right?
It does, so that's normal, so that's average.
So
we're hoping that helps.
But a lot comes from that Sierra snowpack, which may not be as far north as what you might think. I mean, Oroville is a huge one, and that's kind of on the break line on that precipitation deal.
Yeah.
Because most of your storage for California is in the Sierras, not in the reservoirs.
Correct.
That's where it comes from, yeah.
That's where it comes from.
But if it's not stored during snow, if it's warmer, I mean, you're not going to be able to pick it up anyway. That's the biggest issue to me, it seems like, for California.
Yes.
Is that your storage capacity is very low compared to other states.
Right. Our storage has historically been
in terms of in reservoirs. Yeah.
It's been in the snow and having it slow down, trickle down slowly. And so when you have those hotter temperatures that melt the snow quicker, it causes, it really
goes to sea.
It's something that the state is
sea,
going to have to address in the coming years.
Yeah.
So just what has the state been doing to address this? Our governor has put out several different drought declarations. The most recent one was October 19th of 2021. What's kind of different from this drought than others? He didn't declare a statewide drought immediately. He did it by region and by county. So again, kind of recognizing that in Southern California, and other places where there was more diversity, the lack of water up north wasn't impacting our areas quite as much. In fact, our region has not taken any water from up north pretty much this whole year, and so we've been able to balance our supplies using Colorado River water and our local supplies. But he did go statewide as of October 19th, brought that down to the whole state. He authorized the state board to put into place emergency regulations. Those regulations are pretty, don't allow runoff, don't allow, don't rain, don't water after it rains, things like that, And for our region, our water agencies kind of have those prohibitions in place already. We don't allow those things now. And so again, it's kind of common sense things that are in those regulations.
So is anybody discussing at all the possibility of using gray water for toilets?
You know, it is discussed and it's discussed quite a bit. There's a couple of different challenges, you know, depending on, there are some agencies that do use gray water for toilets. They tend to be in areas that there is a lot of high density development so that you can, you know, kind of circulate it right then. You also kind of have to be careful of balancing gray water and, you know, if you have a recycled water system, you know, balancing those out as well. And so those are definitely things that we discussed and we work our way through. There's also a ton of regulation when you're talking about gray water in buildings. It's just really heavily regulated. So anytime something's heavily regulated, it's very expensive. And so again, you have to kind of look at that. Where's the balance between cost and reliability and what can we do and where's the best place to put our efforts and how can we do that?
So do they allow gray water to be used for vegetation here or not? You know, if it's
They
just gray
do.
water, you know.
They do.
water, They do.
Again, you can have a gray water system. You can even have it at your home.
Uh-huh.
What we kind of found out is that it's supposed to be permitted, but most people that do gray water systems don't exactly get them permitted.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a nightmare here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and everybody has different regulations and, you know, and again, you know, health and safety is the #1 priority. And so when you have a lot of homeowners doing unpermitted things, you have to be, it's concerning to us. You know, we want to make sure that we're balancing health and safety with reliability again.
But vegetation probably uses more water than actual showers and toilets, right?
It depends on what time of year it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and what kind of weather we're having.
If you live here, you can't afford to have a lawn in Mr. Rich, okay? Let me just
Okay.
throw that out there. My sister, who lives in Santee,
Uh-huh.
so she's under Padre Dam District,
Mhm.
pays more and she uses minimal. She pays about 3 times what I do for my water in Southern Nevada.
So what does she pay per 1,000 gallons?
I don't know, but it's like, her bill is 3 times mine.
But it's still
I
probably
don't
small,
know. I
right?
don't know what the cost per gallon is, but it's,
What's her bill?
her bill is about 120 a month.
Yeah.
And talking about that, is the price of water tiered? You use more, you pay more?
Different agencies have different tiering. So we're again a wholesaler, we don't have any direct customers, so we don't tier the water, it's just straight. So it's up to the individual.
And a lot of that is infrastructure costs as well. Even if she doesn't use a drop, her bill is $60 a month.
Right.
That's a good point.
Shannon,
Yeah.
some of the districts that have agriculture, they'll give you a small discount if you're in commercial production. But you also sign off that if in the case of an emergency, you will be the first one to kind of give out the water and then preserve that for more residential
Yeah, so that's,
uses. So that's sort of the
the
trade-off.
water authority has that program, it's our ag discount program. Again, it's that reliability versus cost. So some people are flexible and if it's a, you know, a drought emergency, they can cut back and it's not real harmful. And there are others that are like, no, that would really destroy my business. I need to pay the higher rate. for water.
One of the challenges with the 30% cutback years back was that most farmers here, like orchard crops, were pretty, you know, operating at a higher efficiency than you know most other like flood irrigation per se. So absorbing a 30% cut, it makes it really hard, you know, when you're operating at say an 80% efficiency or higher. And so the only way for those people to do was taking out really sections of their groves or really going with the heavy stumping or doing other things that really cutting back and you know, to accommodate that 30% cutback.
And then we have an executive order that calls for 15% voluntary use reduction in cuts. So October got us close to that 15%. We were about 13% statewide, 11% down in the Southern California Southwest region. We had about a 21% decrease in San Diego. Again, there was a lot of rain in October, so the month-by-month comparisons are really hard to do. Weather impacts it a lot. Like I said, they're comparing this to 2020. We haven't had a lot of increase in use since 2020. We didn't have a lot of increase in 2020, and so our demands were already low. So it's a little bit of a challenge to get that 15% for some areas. This is where we have this, that most people are being impacted. The initial allocation, this is the first time it's ever happened out of the state water project, is 0%. Some of the contractors have asked for health and human safety deliveries of water. So they're looking at 55 gallons per person per day for their areas. The state is right now allowing local leaders to make the decision as to how to, if you need to go mandatory. Again, some agencies might not need to really cut back a whole lot. You know, we always encourage conservation. We support the governor's call for a voluntary 15%, but you know, we always also recognize that we have reliability in this area. And some places, 15% may not be enough. They need to go, clearly if you have a 0% allocation, you're gonna have to make some really hard choices. So we continue to wait, see what weather does, see what continued conservation does across the state, and see what the governor's next steps are. Again, State Water Board is doing the prohibitions we talked about, just really, you know, general common sense type prohibitions. They've got a draft out right now, coming through to December 23rd. We really appreciate regulation during the holidays. For the Water Authority, we've activated the first stage of our water shortage contingency plan. All urban water suppliers within the state have staged water shortage contingency plans based on 10% increments, and they kind of like show what you would do during different levels of shortage. We put together our first level, it's a voluntary level. We thought that was kind of appropriate for what's going on within our region, and still in support of the governor's call for voluntary conservation. Again, we still have the supply, so it's not necessarily supply based, but we do also want to be cautious because we don't know what's moving for water levels and what'll happen with water moving forward. So you can kind of see these are different stages. Level 1 is up to 10% voluntary. Water reduction is not an exact science. The same things you do for 50% voluntary, you would do for 10% voluntary. And we didn't want to go to mandatory, which was in level 2. So what we've been doing right now is really reaching out to our leaders in Sacramento, you know, explaining what's going on here in San Diego, you know, seeing how we can help our neighbors and others. Yesterday there was an article out, this week an agreement was made between MWD and the San Diego County Water Authority. We had some water stored up north. They're buying that from us because we don't need it currently, but some of their agencies are being really impacted by the 0% allocation. And so, you know, again, we're able to help them out in a time of need. So we're continuing to do rebates. We'll continue to have rebates for all customer classes. Yeah. Any questions? Any other questions?
Trying to clarify, on one slide, you said like 60% of the water source was Colorado River.
Mhm.
And then it boiled down to the pie chart of different uses. And the river, it didn't seem like the Colorado was as much a part of that.
So this
'cause it's-
one, sorry.
Conservation and ID.
Yeah, it's
Oh.
this one here. Yeah, so we have the 31% right there is Colorado River water, and the 19% is also Colorado River. So it's a canal lining project that we did. That's conserved water from Colorado River, aqueduct, and the conserved water from IID.
Okay.
So both of those, yeah.
Okay.
So on that same line, you're gonna amend substantially the potable reuse that you had mentioned
Mhm.
for 2045. And so although that's the main effort that has proven cost effective.
That's what our member agencies are doing moving forward. It has kind of, it's both wastewater and water that are costs that are being factored into there. And so that's one of the things that's being considered or is being put into place for 2045.
What is the capacity of the desalination plant? I mean, if you were operating at full throttle,
We operate it pretty much at full throttle all the time. And so it's at full capacity right now.
and what is the capacity? I mean, how much water is it?
I will get that for you. I can't, I'll talk about
And
it.
how much does it cost?
I'll get that for you too, yeah.
For a group of economists.
But
I
just
know, I'm
kind of
so
a-
sorry. I will get
Just as a
that.
relative,
I will text somebody when I stop talking, I'll get those two numbers for you.
I was just wondering, well, just kind of get a sense, is it more cost effective or less cost effective than the water we're bringing in?
Oh, it's less cost, it's more expensive, yeah.
More expensive, okay.
Could you talk a little bit about the difference between potable reuse and the recycled?
So recycled is purple pipe, basically, so it's like irrigation of lawns or, agriculture. Potable reuse is it's highly treated, put into a reservoir, and then it's put back into the
So
pipes.
like the recycled is like a grade 2 because it's not as treated.
Right,
Okay.
right, yeah, so it's just used for non-potable purposes. The potable reuse is used for all purposes.
So a question for all of Southern California is, you're making it sound like San Diego's got it pretty well figured out, but is that common amongst all the other counties north of there?
There is, Metropolitan has invested a lot in reliability. They are having some challenges right now because they have some areas of their district that can only get state water project water. So their different supplies don't make it to there. And so that's where they're having challenges. Is that those areas are they're trying to figure out how to get the Colorado water to those areas. to meet their needs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what about the fallow program, that's over along the Colorado River on the, I think, Palo Verde Irrigation District? Does that water then, is that calculated in here as more water from the Colorado River or not?
Isn't that part of the conserved water there?
Yeah, it may be part of the conserved water.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
the conserved water. So that's,
And it might be somebody else.
but that's
Yeah,
actually going down, right?
Actually, I believe that would be part of the metropolitan part, right? Because isn't that
Yeah.
deal of metropolitan Palo Verde?
Is it? Okay. But that's dropping though quite a bit by 2045. But I guess your total water is going up.
The total water is going up, yeah.
But still, it seems like it looks like it's smaller amount going from 18 to 8%.
Which one? MWD?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the potable reuse is gonna start to take over the demand from MWD. And MWD doesn't just serve us, they serve all of Southern California.
What water you were asking about?
Well, and the fallowing program, like with the Palo Verde Irrigation District over in
Mhm.
Western California over there along the river, as I understand, the growers can put in bids to fallow their land. They can't fallow everything, but they can fallow a certain percentage. And a lot of them have done it because was relatively attractive compared to the ag returns.
Mhm.
Well, as we can see, I mean, $2,500 or, the price here versus the price of water on the other side. A lot of growers would be willing to go split somewhere halfway in there, and
Do you know what kind of increase
I think you're right.
customer base?
But I guess they do it up in the Palo
Do
Verde.
you, like
I-
San
I
Diego's
water
growing
district
by
too.
2% a year,
But all
5% a
have
year,
the same
10% a
similar
year.
program.
That's what
So you
I'm
have-
saying.
kind of see
But I
here,
think that's
2020, we're around
conserved
water,
460,000
That's what I
feet.
was talking about.
It's gonna go up to about 630,000
But I guess they do it
acre
in,
feet, so,
Like the Blythe, Palo Verde.
not,
Okay.
we're
Water
not
district
doubling,
too, sounds like. I
but
didn't know
we
that.
can have a significant.
37% increase in the 25. The water.
Yeah, but the growers don't get very much of that money.
Okay, well, thank you, Elizabeth.
Okay,
That was
thank
really important. Oh, one more question?
No, I was just gonna make a smart ass comment. Uh,
That's my job.
Not the one on the water rights.
Oh, the cut,
Where you are,
this one,
yeah, you're down, you have some very secure water rights.
yeah,
But you're low in the use, and so I can see if Russ is thirsty in Arizona or whatever.
Nevada only uses 9% of the Colorado River water. Can I throw that out there? But yeah, we're getting cut first. Really? Yeah.
But even in Washington State,
But it's
there's
stored in your state.
a lot of social
Here we get to look at it.
challenges on the water rights.
Mhm.
Like in the Columbia Basin, they feel they're very secure, but the Indians
Mhm.
have lawsuits claiming that water, but
Right.
it doesn't make it so secure in the future, you know? I was just gonna make a smart ass comment about. Russ is gonna wash his car, and you guys might go a little thirsty. And the social norms too. I mean, you get that increase in water use, the social norms is, I mean, they're reducing. At least you guys have the military base here.
Yeah.
I'm just being smart, but on a very serious issue.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank
thank you,
you.
Elizabeth. Appreciate it. Are you gonna stay around? for the next- Okay, great. So we may have,
She's got homework.
we
I
may
gotta go. I
have
gotta text
some
somebody.
other questions come
Thoughts?
up as after the other speakers present. Our next speaker who's going to join us remotely is Dr. Isaiah Katseka. He is an associate professor of water management in the Department of Land, Air, and Water Resources, and also in the Department of Biological and Agricultural Engineering at UC Davis. His research is focused on advancing our understanding of agrohydrologic processes that impact water, nitrogen, and salt balances in agricultural dominated landscapes. And also on the development of sustainable water management strategies and technologies that optimize crop production and economic outcomes while minimizing negative impacts on the environment. So Isaiah, thank you for joining us. We couldn't tempt you enough with coming to San Diego for a second consecutive week, but glad you can join us remotely. Guess we didn't make a good offer.
Yeah. I will take the offer again. I love San Diego. I'll come back sometime.
All right, well, thank you for joining us and the floor is yours.
Can you see my shared slides?
Yes, we can.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the invitation, and I look forward to the discussions. Please interrupt me as I present. I enjoyed that type of interaction in the last presentation. I'm going to be talking about sustainability of groundwater and irrigated agriculture in the West. And I'd like to talk about two aquifer systems that are overly depleted in the country. This is a map that the USGS put together a couple of years ago showing the most depleted aquifers in the country. The two that I'm going to focus on in this presentation is the Ogallala High Plains Aquifer and the Central Valley Aquifer of California, because both of them are important agricultural regions, and at the same time, they're experiencing unprecedented groundwater overdraft. I'll start with the Ogallala Aquifer. The Ogallala Aquifer is the largest freshwater aquifer in the US and one of the largest in the world. It underlays 8 states, all the way from Texas and New Mexico through Kansas and Colorado, Nebraska, Wyoming to South Dakota. It's approximately 174,000 square miles. It's a gigantic aquifer. It accounts for almost 30% of all US irrigated agriculture. It varies in recharge. The northern part of the aquifer recharges much better than the southern part. In fact, some of the southern part of the aquifer is already depleted in western Texas and Kansas. But in Nebraska and towards the Dakotas, the recharge rates are much higher. Over 90% of the water in this aquifer is used for irrigated agriculture. And its estimated economic impact is about $35 billion a year, most of it due to corn and livestock production in the region. I'll focus on Kansas. I had the opportunity to spend 4 years in Kansas working for Kansas State University, and I was stationed here in Garden City, which is a very intensively irrigated part of the Ogallala Aquifer. And in this animation, you're going to see the decline in water levels between 1996 to 2012. It's really unprecedented because in some areas, like where I was based here, the water level has declined by over 70 feet. So the state had to do something because in most of this region, they use what is called the Prior Appropriation Act, where the water right holder has the right to use water for beneficial use. This water right specifies the location where that water will be withdrawn, the area on which it needs to be irrigated, which is sort of different from the way we manage in groundwater in California. Also in the High Plains region, the water right holder has to report annual water use. So there is very good data on groundwater use. In order to address these overdrought problems, they took two approaches. One of them is called the water conservation areas, where they emphasize local control. An individual water right holder or a group of water right holders can come together and propose what is called a WCA that they send to the state engineer in the Department of Water Resources. And they say, okay, this is our proposal to cut back on water use. We want to cut water by, say, 20%, but allow us to use more water during the drought, more than what our water right agreement states. The alternative is a groundwater district. There are 4 groundwater districts in Kansas, can also propose a strategy to reduce groundwater use, and they call those the local enhanced water management areas. These are overseen at a larger scale by the groundwater districts. In the High Plains, unlike in California, the goal is really not to achieve sustainability because it's not sustainable. Most of the water they are pumping is like oil. It's pariah water. So the idea is to extend the life of the aquifer. Instead of lasting 50 years, try to extend it to 75 years or something like that. And this is an example from one of the limas in southwestern Kansas. What this graph shows on the y-axis is the average annual water level change, or the rate at which the aquifer is declining. And on the x-axis, the annual water use, because they have to report the annual water use every year. And obviously there's a correlation, a negative one. As you increase water use, the rate at which the aquifer decline increases. But in this particular lima, in Southwest Kansas, they proposed a 28% reduction. The local water right holders themselves proposed this. And what that meant is if they cut their water use by 28%, they will go from about 115,000 acre feet per year to about 83,000 acre feet per year. And that would bring them to an average annual water level change of 0, which means they will really extend or push the life that is left in the aquifer. This slide shows you the different groundwater management districts. And here is the famous one that actually initiated the first lima in the state. Unfortunately, what is called day 0, or the day when the wells run dry, has actually already arrived for 30% of the water right holders, meaning they have to transition to dryland agriculture, which is a lot less profitable. And these communities are heavily dependent on agriculture. So there are lots of socio-economic impact. What happens to these communities when they can no longer irrigate or gainfully do agriculture? And within 50 years, it is estimated that 70% of the aquifer will be depleted. Okay, so some of the things that could help is technology, developing technology to help growers cope. In the High Plains, we don't use a lot of these systems in California, but in the High Plains, they use a lot of these center pivot systems because they are cheap in terms of per unit cost compared to drip irrigation. Initially, they started with these high impact sprinklers that, would throw water around over large areas. They are good because you can use them on non-leveled ground and they typically don't have runoff. Now to conserve water, reduce wind drift, they lower the sprinklers from the top to very close to the crop. And to even further conserve water, they are now putting the drops within the canopy. So when they're irrigating, you don't see any water. But these marginal benefits these technologies give you marginal benefits in water use efficiency, but they really don't address the problem of groundwater overdraft. And you also create other problems. For example, this graph shows potential for runoff. When you have these large impact sprinklers, here on the y-axis, you have the rate at which water is entering the soil, and on the x-axis, you have time. You have very low potential for water running off and carrying contaminants to surface water. But when you use these high efficiency systems, because you're irrigating a very small area, this shaded area shows potential for runoff. So you have a lot of water leaving the fields, and so you increase the non-point source pollution issue. So one of the things I did while I worked there was to develop integrate drip irrigation with these center pivot systems.
One of our objectives in this study was there's a lot of interest in mobile drip irrigation versus the spray application, but we're also interested in measuring the crop water use efficiency or water productivity, which is simply the yield per unit of water applied.
So the idea there was that we could integrate drip with sprinkler irrigation to help growers cope with, if you have a 50% cut in water, either due to your well drying or a Lima or water conservation area cutting back, what are some of the things you can do to stretch a limited water resource? A few colleagues of mine put out an article that had a very thought-provoking title. They say that farmers were depleting the Gala Aquifer because the government was paying them to do so. I mean, this is a meeting of economists. You guys understand numbers better than I do. But, in many years, it would cost a lot more money to produce corn than it would cost than the gross income you'd get from it. And the difference was typically paid for by crop insurance. And this encourages growers to continue growing corn, large amounts of corn, and using these large irrigation systems, which results into overuse of the aquifer. And so, for example, in 2020, subsidies totaled over $37 billion, which is a significant amount of money, given that, the price of corn was not very high. And so I want to shift gears now and turn to California, or to the Central Valley Aquifer system, which is experiencing similar but somewhat different problems than the Ogallala Aquifer region. As you know, you are from California, we have a very diverse agriculture system, unlike the High Plains region or the Midwestern agriculture. We go from high value specialty crops to livestock to beef to grapes, and you can see these are the top commodities in the state, dairy or milk being the first one. And the reason we have very successful dairy industry is we can grow forages. We can grow alfalfa, we can grow corn silage or sorghums to feed this dairy industry. But there are a lot of challenges now, water being one of them, but also growers shifting from field crops to more lucrative specialty crops. And the reason that we're very successful in California is we have this Mediterranean climate that allows us to grow crops that cannot be grown anywhere else in the country. So it's not easy to shift these crops. Some people are making the argument that with climate change, we may start to see, for example, almonds shifting to states like Oregon, or in fact, there are almond trials in Idaho already. But it's going to be difficult to shift California's agriculture to places that have more water. The other reason is that we have a very impressive water system that moves water from the northern part of the state to the southern part of the state that mainly involves the state water project and the federal water project and a few local water projects. But this system is experiencing a lot of stress or sustainability challenges. The first one being climate change and associated multi-year droughts regulations. Some people say we have natural droughts and we have regulatory droughts. And of course, markets, but markets tend to be a positive actually for growers when they see an opportunity, for example, increased demand of nuts, they plant more nuts, but in the process end up using more water. So in California, we have the situation where we live in extremes. We're either in a historical drought or historical flood. So this graphic here shows historic floods and droughts from 1969 to 2021. We are actually still in a drought. We've had 2 atmospheric rivers come through, but they haven't gotten us out of the drought just yet. And as you can see, these droughts on the bottom tend to be multi-year. So what this creates is, during a flood, you have to manage this excess flood waters, and during drought, you have to figure out how to reduce water demand. Of course, agriculture is the first one to get impacted. For example, the State Water Project in their initial projections, as they have projected 0 allocation to agriculture. That may change as the water year continues, but that has a lot of socioeconomic impacts if there's 0 allocation to agriculture. And, during the floods, we have, agriculture again impacted, but the opportunities here, if the state can invest in infrastructure to use this flood water to actually recharge groundwater. But there's a lot of work that still needs to be done to build the infrastructure needed to move these excess flood waters from the north to the southern part of the states in places like the Turali Lake Basin that has a lot of potential for agriculture, for managed aquifer recharge by flooding agricultural areas, but you need the canals to move the water around in a very short time. Elizabeth already showed this slide, but it shows you again this issue that we live in extremes in California. In 2017, you can see that almost all our major reservoirs were above the historical average. And in 2021, you can see that almost all but 2 are below their historical water levels. And the problem with this is the farmers respond by pumping more groundwater. In fact, it was more so before Sigma. Then, groundwater was sort of an insurance policy that you could go to when you were in a drought like this. As we'll see in a slide or 2 later, even after Sigma, we're still seeing a lot of groundwater wells being drilled. This slide shows you long-term trends in groundwater levels over a 20-year period. And where you see a red dot, these wells that are declining at a rate of more than 2.5 feet every year. So in 10 years, that well would have declined by 25 feet. We see a lot of them in the San Joaquin Valley here. And the orange ones are declining at a rate of up to 2.5 feet per year. And we see a lot of them here in the, again, in the San Joaquin and parts of the Sacramento Valley. Okay. This is a serious problem. Losing 2.5 feet of water elevation per year has significance in terms of the quality of water that comes out of the remaining storage in the aquifer. You lose aquifer storage, and then you also have subsidence issues where the land starts to sink. And the state passed this landmark groundwater law, the Sustainability Water Management Act, to address this unsustainable use of groundwater. basically has two pillars. One is emphasizing the idea is groundwater is most efficiently managed at the groundwater at a local level, where it established three groups of stakeholders. You have the Department of Water Resources that acts as a regulatory agency. You have the State Water Resources Control Board that sort of acts as the police or the enforcing agency. And then it also created these local agencies called the GSAs, or Groundwater Sustainability agencies that would actually do the implementation. And then also establish what people call the 6 sins of Sigma, or the things that you shall not do. The first one is GSAs shall not allow groundwater levels to lower. You should not allow reductions of storage. You should not allow seawater intrusion. You should not allow degraded water quality. You should not allow subsidence. You should not allow surface water depletion. These are going to be very hard for a lot of these groundwater sustainability agencies to actually achieve. They had a deadline of January last year to submit the GSPs, or groundwater sustainability plans. And the state has actually thrown back a lot of them back to these GSAs for being inefficient in terms of their plans to achieve these objectives. This slide actually is very recent, from an article in the LA Times showing the number of wells that have been constructed since passing Sigma. You know, you would expect that you will see less well drilling, but well drilling continues in many parts of the Central Valley Aquifer system, especially here in the Turali Lake Basin area and parts of the San Joaquin Valley. And this in part is in response to the drought, but also Sigma gives these GSAs up to 2040 to really achieve these sustainability goals. And in some respects, some people think that there was a very long time that gives people, allows people time to continue over using the groundwater. Besides water quantity problems, we have very serious water quality problems in the Central Valley Aquifer system. This graph on the left shows nitrate concentrations in groundwater. And the red show areas that exceed the EPA limit of 10 milligrams per liter. The problem with having a lot of nitrates in groundwater is it affects the oxygen levels in your blood, and this can be fatal, especially for children and pregnant women. So it's actually regulated by the EPA, which, you know, we shouldn't drink water that exceeds 10 milligrams per liter. But you see that most of the areas that have groundwater over depleted also have this large water quality problem, and most of it is associated to non-point source pollution from agriculture. And to address this, there are various laws, but one of them is the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program, which regulates how much nitrates can be discharged. And growers organize themselves in terms of in form of coalitions that represent them and train them on what kind of management practices they can do to limit the amount of nitrates they're discharging. And we have several coalitions across this Central Valley region. And most recently, we had another law that was approved by the State Water Resources Control Board, which is called the Salt and Nitrate Program Management Plan. We have a nitrate problem, but long-term, we also have a salt or salinity problem. And growers have already received notices to comply with this new law. And they have two pathways. They can comply as individuals, or they can comply via a management zone. As I attended these stakeholder meetings, it seemed to me that the state was encouraging farmers and other stakeholders really to organize themselves into these, what they call management zones. And this is no longer just irrigators, but it includes a management zone can include all discharges, dairies, ranchers, food processors, wineries, and municipalities can all come together and come up with a plan that they present to the state on how they're going to reduce nitrogen discharges. And if you're in a high priority zone, you should have submitted your intent to comply by now. In areas where the problem is not severe, which are not regulated, these growers have much more time to comply. But the law covers the entire Central Valley Aquifer region. In agriculture, water and nitrogen move together. If you do a poor job in water management, you're going to have a nitrate leaching problem. This graph shows fertilizer distribution uniformity and irrigation distribution uniformity. If you're doing a good job with your irrigation, your nitrogen is going to be distributed in a much uniform way. If you're doing a bad job with your irrigation, your nitrogen uniformity is going to be distributed in a poor way. And what this means is some areas are going to have very high nitrates, some areas are going to have low, and it will end up leaching to groundwater. To me, I think an even bigger problem with groundwater is this issue of salt or salinity. And this problem is, we have it across the state, not just in the Central Valley, but the Central Valley has unique challenges because parts of where we have these high levels of salts, more than 16 decisiemens per meter, don't have much rainfall to do the leaching required to bring salts, to drive salts out of the root zone. You can see here in this picture how salts have actually killed this orchard. So these white rings are actually salts that are coming with the irrigation water in this double-line drip. There was a study done by colleagues here at UC Davis that estimated that over 250,000 acres have already been taken out of production due to this salt problem. And 1.5 million acres are already impaired, meaning you can grow some crops, but you're not going to get optimum production. And it's projected that this problem is going to cost the state about $1.5 billion per year by the year 2030. And droughts are not helping. Droughts are actually exacerbating this problem. As I did for the Gala Aquifer, I would like to zone into one region in the Central Valley and see what they are trying to do to achieve groundwater sustainability. And I would like to focus on one of the GSAs in Madera County, called the Madera County Groundwater Sustainability Agency. So if we take a look at a typical well in this groundwater basin, if you do nothing, by the year 2030, this 2040, which is the year these agencies were given to achieve sustainability, your groundwater level would have dropped to about minus 200 feet, okay? So this is a problem. So these GSAs have to figure out how to reverse this trend in groundwater decline. And what the Madera Groundwater District is proposing is that, okay, we have a situation where the water that we are extracting, the green bar here, is much larger than the natural recharge that we can put back into the aquifer. So what can we do about this issue to achieve sustainability? One of the things they're planning to do is to do recharge. They want to divert all available floodwaters to recharge them into groundwater. And they estimate they can get a net recharge of about 60,000 acre feet. But again, they are still extracting much more water than the natural recharge and the dedicated recharge program. So they need to do something else. And what they're also proposing, in addition to groundwater recharge, they want to do water demand reduction. where they actually take land out of production by either retiring it, or the state now has a new program called the Multi-Benefit Land Repurposing Program, where growers will be given money through the GSS to actually take land out of agriculture production into some other beneficial land use program. And they expect that by doing these two practices, they can reduce water demand by over 100,000 acre feet and increase recharge by 60,000 acre feet. And that will bring them closer to a sustainable level. Again, they're focusing on these two things: recharge basins and other supplies. And in terms of consumptive use, they're taking land out of production, and they're also looking at water transfers or water markets, bringing in water from other regions. And and unlike the High Plains region in California, very few groundwater basins can actually have water meter data. So it's very hard to know how much each individual grower is using. And because of that, it's very hard to actually manage demand or concretely reduce water use through consumptive use reduction. And this Madera GSA has been quite innovative. Instead of water metering, they are using satellite estimates of groundwater use as a proxy. And as I said earlier, the state has been very critical of most of the GSAs in the Central Valley. In fact, it has pushed back most of their groundwater sustainability plans. And there's been a lot of this in the media. For example, this article says that as the state groundwater corp critical Central Valley plans to cut pumping. So they have to go back to the drawing board and really come up with plans that will convince the state that, yeah, they will achieve sustainability. And so this is an example of what Madera is using. They're using satellites from NASA and in partnership with private companies that take, this data and run them through surface energy balance models to estimate groundwater use. They call it ET of applied water, or the ET that goes off the field due to the water that was applied, not the ET that can be associated with rainfall, natural rainfall. So the way they do that is that the satellites can estimate the total water use from a field by measuring the temperature. As you can see here, the blue fields are cooler than the red fields. And so the blue fields tend to have much higher evapotranspiration in inches per day. And then the Department of Water Resources in Sacramento has these equations for estimating ET due to rainfall. So if you take the total from the satellite and submit the ET from rainfall, then you get the ET due to the water that the grower applied. And that is the ET that is regulated or allocated. And that's the one on the right. One of the challenges, the growers have been skeptical about the accuracy of these, satellite estimates. You don't have anything in the field. How can I be sure that what you're measuring is accurate? My research group, as well as a couple of other groups, have been really trying to validate how accurate these estimates are. And they're reasonably accurate, as we demonstrate here in some of the work we did in almonds. The orange is the satellite image provided by a private company called Irrigated, and then the blue is a flax tower that we put in an orchard. And the two reasonably agree. The error is within 1 millimeter per day. And just quickly to wrap up, what do you do? I mean, if you're a grower and, the Groundwater Sustainability Agency takes water from you or says you can't pump much water, the few things you're left with is to fall back to technology. By the way, if these GSAs are not able to manage groundwater, the state comes in develops the groundwater sustainability plans that it gives back to the GSS to implement. So they have an incentive to at a local level to actually manage groundwater. So the other things we've been doing to help growers cope is, if you don't have water, one of the challenges is to improve water productivity or the economic yield you get per unit of water you apply. And if you're growing specialty crops like nuts, it's very hard to get an orchard that is uniform. So if you know you have these, like you can see in this orchard on the left, the green is a good part, the light green are not so good part. You can reduce inputs to parts of your field that you know are not very productive. Or you can try to bring their production up. And most of this variability is is water induced, which is driven by variability in soil. So the figure on the right here is soil variability expressed as electrical conductivity. You can see that the variability of the soil here matches very well with the variability in which the canopy has developed. So these little things can help growers better cope with limited water or push the envelope in terms of water use efficiency. This particular grower, what he did was to cut or make zones. He already had this system, so he just needed to do some simple retrofitting to create zones that matched the different soil types. As you can see, this field has 3 distinct soil types. You have the heavy soil, which is the blue, the layered soil, which is the green, and then you have the red soil that is gravelly. The idea is zones that have similar soils need to be turned on together and so on. This reduces leaching, but also helps the grower improve productivity overall. And you can see that the yields, this is almonds, and the yields would vary from about 4,200 tons to about 2,600. This is a large variability in yield. So if you can reduce this variability, I think it would help water use efficiency. Okay. Again, we show that you can predict this yield using satellites, and there's strong correlation between in-field yield prediction and satellite predictions. In addition, there's a lot of tech coming out of the Bay Area for agriculture, as well as other areas for growers to use. There are now all sorts of sensors. For example, you can embed tree sensors in stormwater potential in trees, or you can get these large-scale neutron probes that measure soil water over the entire orchard instead of a specific location. To help, again, the idea is to help give growers tools to better use water. And we have shown that some of these are promising. As you can see here, the stormwater potential sensors work pretty well. They replace an old technique where you had to go cut a leaf, put it in a pressure chamber, and so on. And again, here, the technologies for soil moisture monitoring that are less labor intensive, but very accurate. Again, this technology also replaces an old neutron probe that was very, very efficient, but it has an active radio source. So you need clearance or a permit to use it, but this can now be replaced by newer technology. And we show that the two agree pretty well. A few concluding remarks. One, groundwater use in many aquifers in Western US is unsustainable, and we have to change how we're using groundwater. Climate change will exacerbate groundwater overdraft in many major aquifer systems. Local control of groundwater is key. Instead of having the state come down to localities and tell them how to use groundwater, we need to build collaborative mechanisms for water to be managed at the groundwater level. And this is being done not just in the high plains, but also here in California through SGMA. Irrigated agriculture in the West faces many challenges. Advanced technologies can help growers improve their productivity while using less water. But one of the challenges why growers have not taken up most of these technologies is very few have actually demonstrated a return on investment. And long-term groundwater sustainability will require partnerships between growers, regulators, private sector, environmental groups, and other stakeholders. And thank you for your attention, and I can answer any questions, if any.
Thank you, Isaiah. Any questions for Isaiah? And before we transition to our next speaker? No?
Thank you so much. Way over my head level, but the economic piece would fit in there very nicely. Yes. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Isaiah. Will you stay around for the Q&A portion, Isaiah?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Our next presenter is Christy Hansen, who's an ag economist at the University of Wyoming. And Christy is going to share her perspective on water issues impacting the West and perhaps touch on some of the projects that she's been working on, and kind of a complement what has been discussed here from the local San Diego county basis to what Isaiah covered related to water management, and sort of give her, sustainable groundwater management, and give a kind of a broader perspective, perhaps with some specific example that you may be working on. So Christy, take it away, and thank you for joining us at the last minute.
Well, thank you, Ramiro, and thank you all for having a water session. This has been really interesting, and I won't take that much time because we don't have that much time left, and I'm hoping there's time for Q&A with all of us. But I think I really, at this point, wanted to focus in on the Colorado River Basin issues. I just spent the last 3 days at the Colorado River Water Users Association in Las Vegas, where there were over 1,000 attendees representing the 7 basin states and Mexico, and conservation NGOs, and most, if not all, of the 29 federally recognized tribes that have water rights in that basin. And it was a huge deal. And I just really enjoyed hearing Elizabeth's presentation, because it's a tribute to the of water in the West, that even though I live over 1,000 miles away from where you all are in Southern California, one of the water issues that I spend a lot of my time on these days is directly related to one component of Elizabeth's water supply portfolio all the way down there in San Diego, the Colorado River water. So I just wanted to mention that it was, at this Water Users Association over the past 3 days, some of the items that Elizabeth mentioned are very much front and center in those discussions. The quantification settlement agreement outlining how and when California gets water from the Colorado River Basin was a big topic of discussion. And so was this San Diego agreement with the Imperial Irrigation District to do conservation and the related lining of the All-American Canal. These were topics of great interest to everybody at the conference. It was a fairly sobering conference, right? I mean, Lake Mead and Lake Powell, the two largest reservoirs on the Colorado River Basin, are currently at about 30% of their combined capacity. And so the drought over the past 20 years has just really driven the reservoir levels down. And so now there's lots of concern in Lake Powell in particular about dropping below power pool, which has revenue implications for the Bureau of Reclamation. So a lot of discussion, big picture questions there about how to meet all of the demands on water in the basin if current drought conditions continue and if forecasted supplies are even lower than they have been. And lots of discussion about how to adapt existing laws and guidelines to recognize this new reality that we all seem to be in, or at least we have to plan for moving forward, about how to manage reservoir releases and allocation to make the most of existing supplies. So I just wanted to mention, I think, a couple of things. I mean, first of all, about Elizabeth's presentation, it was so refreshing to hear some actual proactive measures being undertaken on the ground in San Diego to implement conservation. Sometimes the discussion in Las Vegas at this Water Users Association was very high level. So it was nice to hear about some specific actions that are being undertaken. And I did want to mention that one of the adaptive strategies that was discussed at the Colorado River Water Users Association this week was, well, certainly turf removal in Nevada. We don't need grass in the desert. But then also wastewater treatment pilot project that Metropolitan is doing, probably pretty close to San Diego, I would imagine. Those, both seemed really promising, along with some new legislation in Utah for facilitating water banking to move water to its highest and best use. And then also discussion about storing water in forests, especially upstream in the basin, to reduce erosion, improve water quality, and also provide a break for wildfires. So I will leave it there, except I do want to mention, there was some talk early in Elizabeth's presentation about the cost of desal. If I could just throw some numbers into the conversation. First, Elizabeth mentioned that Metropolitan San Diego have a 0% allocation of state water project water. If and one hopes that maybe there will be some water from the state water project this year, maybe they'll change their minds as conditions improve. But the water from that project currently costs Metropolitan approximately $300 per acre foot. And about half of that is the cost of electricity and getting the water up over the Tehachapi Mountains and into the LA Basin area. So that's $300 per acre foot for state water project water, if there is any, approximately. And as I understand it, Elizabeth, does this sound right, that the Carlsbad desal project is approximately $1,000 per acre foot at the wholesale level? So those are just some numbers that I'll throw out there, because we economists like numbers. I'll leave it there in case we all want to have a discussion and talk about these issues.
She just said it was $2,700 per acre foot. Yeah. So that they're paying $2,500 per acre foot for the flower farm. So yeah.
Okay, thanks.
$300 is a bargain.
You can get it.
Oh, thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks, Christy. Appreciate it. And you mentioned the breakdown of the cost in your text. What was that related to the electricity cost of the desalination? Can you share that figure with the group as well?
Yeah. Actually, I just did. This is what I was just talking about. So $300 per acre foot from the state water project, and then well upwards of $2,000 for Carlsbad desal water.
Okay. Thank you. And we'll open the room for questions for the whole panel. So thank you, Christy. That was great. Question, guys?
I just want to say thank you to all for all the water people to be here. I know that you've got one of the toughest jobs, because whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting over. So thank you for having, being willing to show up. Yeah.
So let me ask it's kind of a simple question, but it may be more complex to answer. So what agency, who ultimately makes the decisions on the Colorado River water as we go forward?
Elizabeth and Isaiah may have thoughts on that, but so there is no Colorado River. The 1922 Colorado River Compact is basically the first governing document, and there are a number of other compacts and treaties and minutes, et cetera, that stem from that. But the Colorado River Compact of 1922 does not specify a commission that governs the compact, and a lot of other compacts around the country do have that. And so instead, it's the 7 basin states and the Bureau of Reclamation and Mexico that have historically been involved in governing that. And there's a lot of increased recognition that the tribes also need to be there at the table as well, and also in the conservation NGOs as well. And so I guess I would just say that I think one thing that is sort of looming in all of the conversations on the Colorado River Basin is the threat of litigation, and nobody wants that. And so maybe that's more than anything else what keeps people focused on trying to work together to find solutions.
Any other question?
On the desalination plant, on the salt, I always thought that was a big problem on the salt produced. Is that still a problem or not?
For the seawater desalination?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that's an issue.
How much the desalination though is focused on, the heating kind of technology versus the, maybe, I guess with the hydrophobic or the mats that are like, anti-salt so that they wash the water somehow. And I'm not familiar enough with the technology. I just know some people that are supposedly working on that. But, they figure that will substantially bring down the cost because you're not using as much energy,
Yeah, I mean, those are always kind of working together. I'm not myself an expert on the desal plant. I, again, know enough to be dangerous about it, but yeah, I mean, those are always things that we're looking for improvements in. Electricity is one of the big ones. Including the electricity efficiency. Again,
So maybe Isaiah, you know this, but what is the structure of like the underground, rivers or streams and whatnot in the West in particular, in some of these areas of, like California? I mean, it's not as simple as just like Gala Aquifer, right? Or is that not the case in terms of the groundwater? Because as I understand, the Sierras will take water out, way to parts of the valley, or some people think that, I don't know, so that there's like a sustainable level of groundwater replenishment that's maybe higher than what you might predict from just a rainfall,
That's a good question. In some sense, we're in a much better place compared to the Ogallala because our aquifers can actually recharge. We get enough precipitation. We have most of our aquifers are alluvial aquifers. Means when we get enough rainfall, we can replenish the water we have overdrafted. Current estimates are that we're overdrafting the aquifer by more than 1.5 million acre feet. And this we could make up through either land repurposing or recharge. The High Plains Aquifer, that's paleo water. It was formed there from long geological processes. So they only recharge at less than half an inch. Most of the High Plains Aquifer less than half an inch a year, which is not a very good place to be. There are various studies that have been done in California which show we can achieve sustainability, but we need a lot of investments to optimize how we, for example, how we operate our reservoirs. If an atmospheric river is coming through, we should have mechanisms to release water in the reservoirs to flood fields. And to do that, you need a lot of infrastructure to move around the water in a short time. But yes, we can achieve groundwater sustainability.
So is it possible to take some of the water that maybe, if everything warms up more so that the water's like running downstream, a lot more runoff, say like in April, May, than when the crops maybe typically would be drawing from it? Is recharge viable at all to try to increase some of the aquifers in California, or is that not really being looked at?
Yeah, there are a lot of people working on this issue. In fact, DWR has a large, fairly well-funded program called FLOODMA. And the mandate of this FLOODMA is to figure out how to identify working landscapes where they can flood these areas in a short period of time. The challenge is April, May is getting too close to the growing season. If the waters can come earlier in the winter or early in the spring, that would be much better from an agronomic point of view. If you're planning to put the water on active agricultural ground.
Right. So I mean, most of the recharge requires being applied to large agriculture areas, I guess. It's no other fields or abandoned fields to apply recharge, I guess, to be effective. Is that correct?
Yes, the agricultural areas are good in a sense that they have already infrastructure. Irrigation districts have infrastructure to deliver water to where these agricultural fields are, but it's a balancing act where agricultural fields have a lot of residual agrochemicals, which in the short term will be transported to groundwater through the recharge. But for permanent crops, there's also a risk that you create conditions that kill the crops.
Yeah, because a lot of the recharge in Arizona is just going on, desert lands, ponds, and they found out that it sinks down a lot faster than they thought it would, but.
Right. In Arizona, from what I understand, they're not doing any agricultural managed aquifer recharge. They have the dedicated basins for groundwater recharge.
Right.
Any other questions? No?
Mine is less of a question, more of a comment. We hear numbers like $3,000 for an acre foot, and that makes people's jaw drop, but that's still less than a penny a gallon. So to me, it really comes back to managing crops successfully for where they should be grown at economically. And so, that puts a lot of pressure back on our farmers to make really good decisions, but it doesn't seem out of realm to charge those kind of numbers.
Yeah, I mean, basically like $3.07 per 1,000 gallons is $1,000 an acre foot. So, I mean, 10,000 gallons per month for a house is a lot of water. So, I mean, that's $30 at the margin roughly, So, I mean, there's no way ag can compete with urban use if you look at it in that respect,
Yeah, the question is what options are available to maximize the return on per unit of water, because sometimes you're bound to what you can grow without getting into some controlled environment type technology. Okay, well, unless there is any other question, I want to thank you all for joining us. Isaiah, Christy, Elizabeth, thank you so much. That was very informative.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll get you guys down here and have a more robust discussion in person and with more people engaged. So really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, so I guess the last item we have on our agenda here is basically,
I think we gotta go.
okay, you gotta go, okay. I know some people that go here, so.
Yeah, and I think we don't have enough people to conduct much business either.
Yeah, and I think the main thing is just in terms of election of our next officer. I know Patrick is on, but Pat has indicated he's willing to move into the next officer role. So he is everybody's agreement on that, then Pat will be the incoming secretary in Santa Fe for there to kind of continue on the leadership for the 3-year term, going from secretary, vice chair, and chair.
Welcome, Pat.
Welcome, Pat.
Yay. Thanks for stepping up.
Yeah, no problem. If I'm the only candidate, then that is okay too. But if there's an election, then that works also.
You've been unanimously elected.
Yeah.
Okay.
Landslide.
Thanks for the nomination and support. So.
But that's actually kind of common through our history is that
Yeah, the
it takes
rotation.
more of a rotation than
Yeah.
a competitive election.
Yeah.
And to where you're gonna be meeting, I assume.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Sounds good. Have safe travels, everyone. I was missed out. It looked like an interesting discussion earlier. I had some other stuff going on.
Whoever wants to grab a bag.
Let's give Romero a hand as well here, yeah, because that was really good. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Enough for everyone.
Okay, good.
And and if you were here, you could have some coffee that Romero's handing out.
Bye.
Thank you much, Romero.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks for
My
everything.
pleasure.
Yeah, thanks to you,
Yeah,
Jan,
you
for
guys
all
are-
your work as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for letting me join in. I don't want to cut it.
Yeah, El Moluyo is our little farm. in Honduras.
Do you need the meeting room
No, I
open?
think we're done. I guess everybody's taking off.
I know you
Okay.
wrote, Sophie, I got you a couple samples.
So I'm gonna go ahead and close the meeting room.
Try to get you
Pat.
the same
We're
variety.
just
Sounds good. Take care, everyone. Safe travels.
And
See you next time.
Either a honey or a natural, whatever I had. So that way you can really see the difference in what you end up with.
Do they all go together?
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna take a ball. Yeah. Thank you. I'll have to give you updates.